It happened on a very quiet night. Not the kind of night that feels special. No big moment. No dramatic change. Just a night that felt still. I remember sitting alone. The room was dim. The light was soft. Outside, the city sounded far away. Inside, everything felt slow. I wasn't sad, but I wasn't excited either. I was simply there, breathing, existing. And that was when I noticed something. Something small, something easy to miss. I realized that I was not the same person I used to be. Not in a loud way, not in a way other people could see, but inside, very quietly. Have you ever felt that? A moment when nothing big happened, yet you knew something had shifted? I didn't plan this change. I didn't even want it. It just arrived, silently. I used to believe that change always comes with noise, with strong emotions, with clear decisions. But that night taught me something different. Change can be gentle. Change can be calm. Change can feel like a soft breath. I thought about my past. Not deeply, just lightly, like flipping through old photos in my mind. I remembered the version of me who rushed everything, who always felt behind, who believed rest was a waste of time. That version of me was always tired, always chasing something, but never sure what. That night, I noticed something strange. I wasn't chasing anymore. I wasn't running. I wasn't even thinking about tomorrow. I was just present. And that felt new. It felt unfamiliar, but not uncomfortable. I asked myself a quiet question. When did this happen? When did I stop needing to prove myself all the time? There was no clear answer. Saw no single moment. Just many small days, many ordinary evenings, many silent choices. Sometimes change doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on the door. It doesn't say hello. It just slowly becomes part of you. Have you noticed any small changes in yourself lately? Maybe you don't react the same way. Maybe you don't get angry as fast. Maybe you don't explain yourself as much. Those things matter, even if no one sees them. That night, I felt a strange kind of peace. Not happiness, not excitement, just peace. And peace felt unfamiliar too. I used to think peace meant giving up. Now I know peace can mean understanding. Understanding that you don't need to hurry. Understanding that life doesn't need to be loud. Understanding that growth can be quiet. I stayed in that moment longer than usual. No phone. See, no music. Just silence. At first, silence felt heavy. Then it felt kind, like it was holding me instead of pressing on me. I noticed my breathing. Slow, natural, unforced. When was the last time you noticed your own breathing? Not to control it, just to feel it. That night, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't making plans. I wasn't thinking about improvement. I was simply allowing myself to be. And that was a change. A big one. Because I used to believe that being still meant falling behind. Now I know that being still can mean arriving. Arriving at yourself. I realized something else too. I had stopped explaining my life to people who didn't listen. I had stopped forcing conversations, stopped proving my worth. That didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly, like leaves changing color one by one. No one claps for that. No one notices. But it's real. Have you ever grown in ways no one noticed? That kind of growth is often the deepest, the most honest, the most lasting. That night didn't change my life, but it changed how I felt inside my life, and that matters more. I didn't wake up a new person. I just went to sleep knowing I was becoming someone different, someone softer, someone calmer, someone who listens more, someone who doesn't rush silence away. I think many of us are changing like this, quietly, without permission, without applause, without a clear before and after. We are changing in the pauses, in the moments between tasks, in the nights when nothing happens. And that is okay. That night taught me something gentle. You don't always need to understand your change. You just need to allow it. You let it move at its own pace. Let it be slow. Let it be kind. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you're in a similar place. Maybe you feel different, but you can't explain why. That's okay. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Some changes are just for you. And maybe, just maybe, this quiet night is part of your story too. The days after that night felt different. Not brighter, not easier, just quieter. I woke up the next morning and nothing had changed on the outside. Same room, same routine, same responsibilities waiting for me. But inside, something felt less heavy, like I was carrying my life with both hands instead of dragging it behind me. I noticed how slowly I moved that morning. I didn't rush out of bed. I didn't check my phone immediately. I just sat there for a moment, letting the day arrive. Have you ever let the day arrive instead of chasing it? It felt strange, almost wrong, like I was breaking an invisible rule. The rule that says you must always be ready, always alert, always moving. But I wasn't. And nothing bad happened. The world didn't collapse. Time didn't punish me. It simply continued. That taught me something important. The world is quieter than we think. We are the ones who make it loud. I went through my day with that quiet night still in my mind. Not as a memory, more like a soft background feeling, like a gentle echo. I listened more, not just to people, but to myself. I noticed when I was tired, when I needed space, when I didn't want to explain things, and for the first time, I didn't fight those feelings. I let them be. So, have you noticed how often we argue with ourselves? We say things like, "You shouldn't feel this way. You should be stronger. You should do more." That day, I stopped saying should. I replaced it with, "It's okay. It's okay to feel slow. It's okay to feel unsure. It's okay to not know what comes next." That night didn't give me answers. It gave me permission. Permission to not rush my becoming. I realized I had been changing for a long time, long before that quiet night. I had been letting go of noise, little by little, unfollowing conversations that drained me, choosing rest over explanation, choosing silence over reaction. Those choices didn't look important at the time, but together they shaped me, like water shaping stone, slow, patient, unnoticed. I think many people expect change to feel dramatic, like a door closing, like a line being crossed. But sometimes change feels like space opening up, space inside your chest, space in your thoughts, space in your day. That space can feel uncomfortable at first, because we are not used to it. We rush to fill it, with sound, with tasks, with distractions. But what if we didn't? What if we allowed that space to exist? That thought stayed with me, especially in the evenings, when things slow down naturally. I used to fear evenings. They made me think too much. They reminded me of things I hadn't done, things I hadn't figured out. Now evenings felt softer, not always peaceful, but less threatening. I started to see them as a pause, not an ending, just a pause, a place to breathe. I would sit quietly, sometimes with a warm drink, sometimes with nothing at all. And I would listen, not to silence itself, but to what silence allowed me to hear. My own thoughts became clearer, not louder, clearer. I could tell which thoughts were tired, which ones were afraid, which ones were not even mine. Have you ever realized that some thoughts don't belong to you? They come from expectations, from comparisons, from voices you've heard too often. That quiet night taught me to question those voices, not aggressively, just gently, asking, "Is this really me?" Sometimes the answer was no, and letting go felt like relief, not loss. I also noticed how I spoke to myself, the tone, the words. I used to be harsh, demanding, always pushing. Now my inner voice sounded different, softer, more patient, like someone who wanted me to be okay, not perfect. That was new, and it felt strange at first, because kindness can feel unfamiliar when you're not used to it. I wondered when I learned to be so hard on myself, and when I decided to stop. There was no clear memory, no turning point, just a gradual softening, a quiet shift. That night didn't make me fearless. I still worried. I still doubted. But fear no longer controlled my pace. I didn't let it rush me. I let it sit beside me instead. Like a companion, not a driver. That changed everything. I started to understand that growth doesn't always move forward. Sometimes it moves inward. Sometimes it moves downward, into roots, into foundations, into things no one sees. That kind of growth takes time, and silence, and patience. Things we don't celebrate enough. I became more selective, with my energy, with my time, with my words, not because I was tired of people, but because I was learning to protect my quiet. And quiet felt precious now, like something fragile, something worth keeping. Have you ever protected your quiet? Or do you give it away without noticing? I used to fill every gap with noise, music, videos, endless scrolling. Now I could sit with nothing and feel okay. Not bored, not restless, just okay. That was a sign of change too. I wasn't afraid of myself anymore. The quiet night became a reference point. Whenever life felt overwhelming, I remembered that feeling, that stillness, that moment of realization, not as a goal, but as a reminder. I don't need to hurry. I don't need to become someone else overnight. I am already becoming, every day, in small ways, in silent ways, and that is enough. So I think many of us are in this in-between space, not who we were, not yet who we will be, and that space can feel uncomfortable, lonely, unclear, but it can also be gentle if we let it, if we don't rush to label it, if we don't force it to make sense. That night taught me that change doesn't need permission. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need a plan. It just needs honesty. Honesty with yourself. And a little silence. If you're listening to this now, maybe you're changing too. Quietly. Without a clear reason. Without a clear destination. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that quiet night isn't the end of something. Maybe it's the beginning. A beginning that doesn't announce itself. A beginning that feels like rest. A beginning that whispers instead of shouts. And maybe, just maybe, well, that's exactly the kind of beginning you need. After that realization, I began to notice small things more clearly. Things I used to ignore. The way light stayed a little longer on the wall in the evening. The sound of distant traffic becoming softer after midnight. The feeling of my breath slowing down when I stopped trying to control it. These things were always there, but I was rarely present enough to notice them. That quiet night didn't give me new eyes. It gave me time. Time to look. Time to feel. Time to stay. I started walking differently too. Not faster, not slower on purpose, just more aware. Each step felt like it belonged to me, not to a schedule. I used to walk while thinking about the next thing, the next task, the next worry, the next version of myself. Now I walked as if nowhere else was waiting. So, have you ever walked like that? As if the moment itself was enough. At first, it felt uncomfortable, almost empty, but slowly that emptiness began to feel spacious, like a room with nothing in it except air and light. And for once, that was enough. I also noticed how often I used to explain myself, why I was tired, why I needed space, why I said no, as if my feelings needed evidence. That night loosened something inside me. I stopped over-explaining. I let my silence speak for itself, not in a cold way, in a calm way. People reacted differently. Some leaned closer, some stepped back. And that was okay. Not everyone is meant to stay as the quieter version of you. That was another lesson. Change doesn't always make you louder. Sometimes it makes you smaller, more contained, more selective, and that can feel lonely. But it can also feel honest. I spent more time alone after that, not because I wanted to disappear, but because solitude felt nourishing, like water after a long thirst. I learned the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness feels sharp. It demands attention. Solitude feels soft. It holds you gently. That quiet night opened the door to solitude, and I stepped in carefully. I didn't rush to decorate the space. I didn't fill it with noise. I just sat there, with myself. Some days that was easy. Some days it wasn't. Some days old thoughts returned. Doubts. Regrets. Unanswered questions. But they felt different now. They didn't attack. They visited. And visits end. I stopped fighting my thoughts. I watched them pass, like clouds, some heavy, some light, none permanent. That changed my relationship with fear. Fear didn't disappear, but it softened. It lost its urgency. It no longer shouted, "You must decide now." It whispered, "Be careful." And I listened, without panic, without rushing. I began to trust my timing, not society's timing, not expectations, my own. That trust felt fragile at first, like a thin thread, but each time I honored it, it grew stronger. I noticed I slept differently, deeper, without replaying the day endlessly. I woke up less tense, less braced for impact. That was when I realized something important. My body had been waiting for my mind to slow down, waiting patiently for years. That quiet night was a signal to my body too, a signal that it was safe to rest, to release, to let go. I stopped forcing myself to have answers. I stopped planning my growth. Instead, I paid attention. Attention to what felt heavy. Attention to what felt light. Attention to what drained me and what quietly filled me. These weren't big decisions. They were small adjustments. Turning down invitations. Turning off notifications. Turning inward. Each adjustment felt insignificant, but together they reshaped my days. Life became less about doing and more about being, and being felt unfamiliar, almost forbidden, but also true. I started to realize how much of my life was lived for others' eyes, even when no one was watching. That night peeled something away. It asked me a simple question. Who are you when no one expects anything from you? I didn't know the answer, not fully, but I was willing to find out, slowly, quietly, without pressure. That willingness was part of the change too. I think we often mistake change for transformation, for dramatic shifts, for visible milestones, but sometimes change is internal, invisible, like a seed underground. Nothing seems to happen, But everything is happening. Roots are growing. Stability is forming. That quiet night was underground for me. No one saw it. No one applauded it. But it supported everything that came after. I began to respect quiet people more. Not because they spoke wisely, but because they listened deeply. I noticed how much wisdom exists in pauses, in unanswered questions, in moments where nothing is said. Silence stopped feeling empty. It felt full, full of meaning, full of truth, full of space to breathe. I learned to sit with uncertainty, not to solve it, just to sit. And that sitting was its own kind of courage. If you are listening now, maybe you recognize this feeling, the sense that something inside you is rearranging itself, not loudly, not urgently, but steadily. And maybe you're unsure what it means. You don't need to name it yet. You don't need to explain it. You can let it be. Let it move at its own pace. That quiet night taught me that becoming is not a race. It's a listening to yourself. And sometimes, the most important changes begin when everything finally goes quiet. After everything became quieter, I noticed how rarely I rushed anymore. Not because I decided to stop rushing, but because rushing no longer felt necessary. The urgency I once lived with slowly dissolved. I didn't wake up with the sense of panic. I didn't feel chased by time. Time felt wide, side stretchable, almost friendly. I began to understand that urgency was never truly mine. It was borrowed. From expectations, from comparisons, from the fear of being left behind. That quiet night helped me return what wasn't mine. I stopped carrying other people's clocks. I started listening to my own rhythm. Some days, that rhythm was slow, almost still. Other days, it surprised me with energy. But either way, it felt honest. I trusted it. That trust changed how I made decisions. I no longer chose based on speed. I chose based on alignment. Does this feel calm inside me? Does this make me tighter or more open? Those questions became my guide. Not logic, not pressure. Feeling. And feeling, I learned, is intelligent. I used to think feelings were obstacles, things to overcome. That night reframed them. Feelings were signals, soft ones, easy to miss if you move too fast. I started paying attention to discomfort, not to eliminate it, but to understand it. Sometimes discomfort meant fear. Sometimes it meant growth. Sometimes it meant I was betraying myself. I learned to tell the difference, slowly, patiently. That patience spilled into my relationships. I listened more, not to respond, but to understand. I allowed pauses in conversations. I didn't rush to fill silence. And something surprising happened. People revealed more. Not because I asked better questions, but because I gave them space. Silence became an invitation. I noticed how much people longed to be heard without being interrupted. That realization made me gentler, not just with others, with myself too. I stopped interrupting my own emotions. I let them finish speaking. Some were sad, some were confused, some were tender. All of them deserved attention. That quiet night taught me that ignoring emotions doesn't make them disappear. Listening does. I also became more aware of endings, small endings, conversations that no longer felt true, habits that no longer supported me, versions of myself that had done their job. Letting go didn't feel dramatic. It felt respectful, like thanking something for what it gave and releasing it without anger. I stopped clinging, not because I didn't care, but because I cared enough to let things change. Change stopped feeling like loss. It felt like movement. natural, necessary. I realized how often I used to hold on out of fear of emptiness, fear of not knowing what comes next. But emptiness, I learned, is not absence, it is space, and space allows something new to enter. That night, space entered me, space to breathe, space to pause, space to be unfinished. I didn't need to define myself anymore. Labels felt heavy, limiting. I preferred fluidity. I preferred becoming. Each day felt less like a test and more like a conversation between who I was and who I was slowly becoming. I didn't need to win that conversation. I just needed to listen. There were days I slipped back into old patterns, days I rushed again, days I doubted. But now I noticed it sooner, and noticing was already progress. I didn't punish myself. I gently returned to breath, returned to slowness, returned to that quiet night. That night became a compass, not pointing north or south, just pointing inward. Whenever I felt lost, I checked in. Am I listening? Am I present? Am I moving with myself or against myself? Those questions rarely gave instant answers, but they always gave direction. I also became more comfortable with not being understood. Not everyone will understand your quiet changes. Some people only recognize growth when it is loud, when it is visible, when it looks impressive. But quiet growth often goes unnoticed. And that's okay. Not everything meaningful needs witnesses. That was a freeing thought. I didn't need validation for my inner shifts. I felt them. That was enough. I learned to honor my limits, to stop before exhaustion, to rest before burnout, to say no without guilt. These weren't acts of weakness. They were acts of respect. Self-respect. That quiet night was the beginning of that respect. So it taught me that rest is not a reward. It is a requirement. That slowness is not laziness. It is awareness. That gentleness is not fragility. It is strength without noise. If you're listening now, maybe you feel this shift too. The pull toward softness, toward simplicity, toward less explanation. You might feel like you're losing momentum, but maybe you're gaining clarity. You might feel like you're falling behind, but maybe you're finally aligned. Change doesn't always accelerate life. Sometimes it steadies it. And steadiness is what allows us to go far without breaking. That quiet night didn't change everything at once, but it changed how I carry everything, and that made all the difference. After that night, and all the quiet days that followed, I stopped waiting for a final version of myself. I stopped asking, "When will I be done?" Because I realized I am not something to complete. I am something to live. That realization softened everything. I no longer felt pressure to arrive somewhere specific. Life felt less like a destination and more like a path that curves, slows, sometimes disappears. And that was okay. I began to appreciate the ordinary moments, the ones that used to feel invisible. Washing a cup in silence, sitting near a window as the sky slowly changed color, listening to my own footsteps in an empty room. These moments didn't ask anything from me. They didn't expect progress. They didn't demand explanation. They simply existed. And in their simplicity, I felt held. That quiet night taught me that meaning doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in repetition, in routine, in calm. I noticed how differently I reacted to life now. When something unexpected happened, I paused. I didn't rush to judge it. I didn't immediately label it as good or bad. I let it breathe. That pause changed outcomes. It gave me room to choose response instead of reaction, and that felt powerful in a very quiet way. I also noticed how much lighter my mind felt. Not empty, just uncluttered. I stopped replaying conversations endlessly, stopped imagining worst-case futures, stopped trying to control what couldn't be controlled. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel peace more often. That night didn't remove uncertainty. It taught me how to sit with it, like sitting with a friend who doesn't need fixing, just presence. I became more honest about what I could carry and what I couldn't. I stopped pushing past my limits to prove something. I realized I had nothing to prove. Life wasn't asking for performance. It was asking for participation, for attention, for sincerity. That changed how I showed up. I spoke when it mattered. I rested when I needed. I listened when I didn't know. And I trusted that was enough. There were still days when doubt returned. Days when the world felt loud again. Days when I wondered if I was moving too slowly. But even then, I remembered that night, that stillness, that clarity, and I returned to it. Not physically, internally. I returned to my breath, to my body, to the present moment. That return became a habit, a gentle one. I stopped trying to rush myself back into certainty. I allowed confusion to exist. Confusion didn't mean failure, it meant transition. I think many of us are always transitioning between versions, between beliefs, between seasons of life, but we rarely give ourselves permission to be in between. That quiet night gave me that permission. It said, "You can rest here. You don't have to decide yet." And rest turned out to be productive in ways I never expected. From rest came clarity. From clarity came alignment. From alignment came confidence. Not loud confidence, quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that doesn't rush. The kind that knows it will keep going even when no one is watching. I began to trust myself more. Not because I had answers, but because I knew I would listen when the answers arrived. That trust felt grounding, like standing on solid ground after a long time at sea. I stopped searching for signs everywhere. I realized my own calm was the sign. If something pulled me away from it, I reconsidered. If something supported it, I leaned in. That became my compass. Simple, honest, effective. The quiet night was not dramatic. No music, no revelation, no sudden transformation. But it changed my direction. And sometimes, direction is everything. I look back now and see how much has shifted. Not on the outside, on the inside. And that inner shift made the outer world feel different too. Less threatening, more open, more forgiving. I learned to meet life where it is, not where I thought it should be. I learned to move with change instead of resisting it. And resistance, I realized, was what exhausted me the most. When I let go of resistance, life felt lighter. Not easier, but lighter. That quiet night wasn't about escaping life. It was about entering it more fully, more gently, more honestly. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, if you feel like you're changing in ways you can't explain, if you feel quieter, slower, more inward, you are not behind. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are listening. And listening is the beginning of wisdom. You don't need to rush this version of yourself. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to make it make sense to anyone else. Let it unfold. Let it take its time. That quiet night taught me that becoming is not loud. It is subtle. It happens while you rest, while you breathe, while you allow yourself to be human. If this gentle story has helped you slow down, if it has given you a quiet place to rest, you can support this channel by liking the video and subscribing. It helps more gentle stories reach people who might need them too. Thank you for staying here until the end. And tonight, as the world grows quiet, may you allow yourself to change without pressure, to rest without guilt, and to trust that you are exactly where you need to be.